All right. Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Tech School. Today we're going to have Andreas Neuman speak. He's a founder, drone and ag tech. So we're kind of excited to learn a little bit about, the technologies he's exposed to and learn a little bit more from him. So it's kind of exciting. Curling's going to, MC the whole thing and probably give him a proper introduction later, but that's kind of a short version. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, feel free to, like and leave a comment, if you guys have questions or anything like that. The more likes and the more comments we get, the more this video kind of gets pushed out to other people. So the more people see it, and it may just, help somebody else. So feel free to do that as well. Over to you, Curly.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was telling Andreas too, we're just coming off of Memorial Weekend, and I had a lot of family in military, and it's always like a touching weekend for me. Like I always think about different groups of different family members, but it's great that at least Andreas has served and a veteran, but also he has like a really amazing startup. So I think it's fun that we're doing it this weekend. But we've been doing this kind of city highlights at the beginning of each tech show and tech school show. And I feel like, it's been fun that Brianna did it last week with Citizen Hive. This week we're gonna do like Sunny with Black Logic. So Sunny, can you do your 30 seconds? You do your elevator pitch. You ready? We'll see. She's been going on and on. And when she comes back on, maybe we'll have that offhand too. If she's not on, what we can do is we can go to Andreas and we can do Sunny afterwards. Yeah, it's that I love having like these live shows to be up with these little technical difficulties, even though I always feel like it's more memorable when we have issues. But what we'll do, Andreas, we'll start with you first, and then we'll do the city highlight shout out for Sunny after our fireside. But Andreas, I met Andreas first at Bunker Labs. Is that right, Andreas?
Yeah, that was right.
Bunker Labs LA. Yeah. I still feel like Bunker Labs LA is like one of those groups that was really special because one is a lot of veteran startups, but it was kind of like a new type of thing, right? It was a new thing even for me that the whole cohort was all veterans and all were in some ways doing things that like were pretty interesting. Yours was the most interesting because even as a kid, I had this whole fascination about drones and flying. So I always loved that. But Andreas, it's great. In a lot of ways, you taught me about a new industry that I didn't know too much about. I think I told you, like, is AgTech still a good word for you in that way? But you've been very helpful, even like just teaching me. So I feel the fact that Andreas has been teaching me all these years, I think he could teach the cohort and teach other people a little bit about the technology, where it's going, what they're doing, and maybe some of the challenges. I think the startups kind of need to know that. His co-founder Michael has this knowledge too. He'll be on. So I have a few technical questions from the startups community, but I want you just to start off, Andreas. You can talk a little bit about yourself, your background.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the typical story of a New York City kid who ended up working in agriculture. Couple of turns to get there. As you said, I was in the Air Force for about 12 years. A lot of that time I was flying real airplanes around the world, kind of living the dream job. And then towards the end, I had an idea that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial and really wasn't going to go to the airlines. Probably wasn't going to do 20 years in the military, because I wanted to go out and actually find a way to start my own company and do that when I was young and hungry still. So transitioned to drones for the Air Force, switched over to the Global Hawk, which is quite different than what we're flying today, which is a 30,000-pound drone with a wingspan longer than a 707 that flies above 50,000 feet. But I did learn a lot about scalability, applications, and really what I learned from that experience was, how do you deal with getting information to the right people at the right time? The drones were just a tool. And that's kind of what I brought into, this company, is that drones are just a very efficient tool for certain types of tasks. And while they get a lot of attention, really the only way to make a profitable this is to solve a real problem, and that really requires you understanding a customer need and not just demonstrating cool technology.
That's great. And I love how you said that. We can talk a bit more about that, what that looks like to make something profitable or service versus scalable. We can talk about those key concepts. But I know I had you do like a slide using this aspect of having this kind of visual that helps people know about UAV IQ. So maybe you see if you can maybe share your screen.
Yeah, we give this a shot.
We'll give it a shot.
Being a technology company and all.
No, it's always interesting when we have these live ones. Oh yeah, we can see you, Andreas.
Is it not screen sharing? I'm getting the blue circle
Oh
still.
yeah, I could totally. We could see it actually. And maybe you could maybe you could do F5. Yeah, perfect.
There we go.
That's great. Yeah, that's good.
It's working on it. It's just hasn't had its last cup of coffee this morning.
It's all good.
Cool. So once again, as we always have to do at start of presentations, touch upon this, but I don't think of ourselves as being a drone company. Think of ourselves as being an agriculture technology company that features deep expertise in drones and also deep expertise in agriculture to figure out how to solve real world problems. Introduce you to a few members of the team. Michael Clark is on the video feed with us as well, but he and I met at UCLA Anderson. I was starting my transition out of the military. At that point, that was actually my transition plan to go to business school directly after the military. Michael had already built a pretty successful career in database science, data strategy, and we went through the venture initiation program together. Tomas Grandperen, met him, jumping ahead a little bit, but when we were in our first accelerator, which gave us our first funding, when we went down to Chile for the startup Chile accelerator. And then Bob Starnes really helped bring in some incredibly deep agriculture knowledge. He was the superintendent of agriculture at UC Davis before joining us. We actually were fortunate enough to meet him. We were selected by an organization to present at UC Davis as a top innovative agriculture technology company. He was in the crowd. We started chatting afterwards. Turns out he was doing drones in a completely different direction than we were at UC Davis. And over the course of about 2.5 years, started finding out where the mutual interests were, and he ended up joining our company, which added obviously a ton of value. A bit of our non-traditional workflow. Talked a little bit about my Air Force background. There's a nice little shot of the drones that we used to fly on that scale. Michael and I's obviously hero shots from before the after party at UCLA's graduation. Got into Startup Chile. We also were in a parallel 18 accelerator out of Puerto Rico, and we've obviously been through Bunker Labs, Thrive AgTech accelerator. So can't speak highly enough about the experience of going through accelerators. If anybody wants to talk offline about it, happy to help navigate that. We started launching our first product. We'll talk a little bit about that story, but it was a remote sensing service doing crop health detection. Here in California, Michael's family has been involved with wine production in the Central Coast here, so we had some pretty deep expertise early on. Even before we formed the company, we're going out to the vineyards here in California and learning some pain points and putting together our first business plans at UCLA. And then took a student loan out with around 2 months left in school. I'm surprised they gave it to me, but they did, and that's how we ended up funding the company and launching. So give a little bit of context. I would include myself in this group of when I used to go out to a vineyard, I thought of it as a nice place to take a date, grab some wine, learn a little bit, but more importantly, it was like a way to get some free glasses of wine and spend a day unwinding and out in the countryside. Learned pretty quickly that there's some really tense people looking at this view. Like you don't get the same viewpoint if you're responsible for a multi-million-dollar operation and you can't really see what's going on at the same time. And that kind of hit home for the military. Is like you don't know what's going on over the next hill. And that's definitely true in agriculture to a certain degree. And what we had learned, what I brought in from my experience with sensors, is that you can cover. This was about a 100-acre vineyard, I believe. You could cover this in 2 weeks with a person, and if you walk parallel to the rows, which you have to unless you're an Olympic hurdler and want to hurdle like a 5-foot high trellis with the vines, you have a really hard time walking and viewing lateral patterns. So just a drone flying over this, you can see that you see some macro patterns, some micro patterns. And this was one of our first flights. We're pretty excited about not only being able to do the pattern recognition, but how far you can zoom in and see the details. You could actually make out individual leaves if you really tried. And here, red is areas of stress and green is areas of relative vigor. And we're like, oh, this is fantastic. People will pay us for this. You can't do this with your eyes. Well, we learned kind of early on the hard way that, people aren't just paying you to deliver a picture like that. First of all, we realized that the products that we were able to deliver from using commercial software and commercial hardware to do the flights and produce these photos wasn't compatible with anything that a farmer had. Very, very few had a geographic information system at all. If they did, it was antiquated. They might have had a team doing it. But basically, we realized that we're developing products that had no end market other than ourselves, and we weren't really built to scale and go out into the field and be a service provider, like adding fertilizer or doing trimming, or there was no action that people could take from that information, but they couldn't even look at it. So that was kind of our first platform. Like, well, we can take the data from commercially available software and bridge that gap between commercial software and farmers. So we decided we'd do a mobile first tool. We could do multiple analysis, layer them on top so you get some geographic context from people out in the field, and also from the drone data sets, and compile them all into one. And for God's sake, let's build a platform that they can actually use out in the field and take the imagery. So that's us with one of our earlier software development, taking the iPad out in the field, pre-marking what we saw in the imagery, and then going out into the fields and finding how does this correlate with real world. And that's one thing that we're really fortunate that Mike's family members were able to do with us, was give us access to fields. We weren't charging anybody for anything at this point. We're paying out of pocket quite a bit, but we realized that we needed to go out there and see, does actually work? Does anybody care what we're doing? And we found out it did. We got a lot of feedback in ways that people imagine using it, would want to use it. And I think that's a lesson learned that a lot of entrepreneurs learn the hard way, no matter how many times you hear it. When customers get excited and say, yo, that's fantastic, we love it. We would love it if you built these other features in there. Being new to software development at this time, I didn't really have the dollar signs rolling in the back of my head in terms of cost. I had it rolling in the back of my head in terms of potential revenue. So every new feature, like, oh, that sounds awesome. Let's see if we can do that. And I think one of the harder lessons was that we didn't really say, what are you willing to pay for it? What were you willing to pay for? We're like, oh, that's great feedback. You find it useful. That's fantastic. We've since moved on from that. The platform that we really built was built upon a concept, once again, from the military, which is called the OODA Loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. We realized that even if we built software for the field, we kind of had to have a methodology, because this wasn't a part of daily practice for a lot of people. They didn't walk out in the fields with their iPads looking at a map and recording observations and then collecting it and using it long term. We didn't want it just to be like one time use that go out in the field and then they don't look at the data ever again. So we kind of developed the methodology that we knew worked, that was easily trainable and could be built into the software flow, which is take the observations, whether it's from people or from drones, and then do some orientation, which means before you go out there, you can look comprehensively over the prior year's history or that season's history, all the notes, and kind of make a team decision. And that sounds kind of basic, but that was in some cases cutting down a 2 or 3 week cycle, where you would have somebody who's an expert in disease go out there, somebody who's an expert in hydrology or irrigation, and you collect all these data sets, and then you have to figure out when can everybody get on the phone and talk about what they're seeing, and you'd have a consultant come in there and kind of lead the teams. So that could be a 3 week cycle, but now through software, everybody in the team could see every data set as they come in, and that really cut the loop down. So once again, we were pretty excited about it. Like, this is big progress. Now are you guys willing to pay for it? And once again, we learned, like, yeah, we'll pay for some trials. I don't know that we really want to convince the entire team. We realized that finding a decision maker was probably our biggest challenge. Like, who says yes and who says yes with the budget behind that? That's really challenging. That goes under know your industry. But we also learned that it's great that you're providing all this information, but unless you can drive action and get people committed to the action, that was an incomplete business model. Kind of like the doctor that does annual checkups, like how many people are really diligent about getting it all the time. And then if you gave somebody a checkup and said, okay, well, here's your problem, now go find somebody else to fix it, the doctor was leaving, a lot of money on the table, or people just became frustrated and like, well, thanks, and I have a problem I don't know how to deal with. So this platform that we had designed, we might have also learned the lesson of over-designing early on. So we were still working on this product market fit, getting people to adopt the technology, and we had this diverse set of complicated requirements where we needed team dynamics. So a lot of this information is considered, very proprietary by farmers. They don't want it public if they're having issues on their field, pest infestations or what have you, for a lot of reasons, for both competitive and for market reasons. So we had to build a system that had strategy of how do you invite people in to look at data that's on a custom built database, but only what information we want them to see. How do you treat employees differently? So we really ended up designing this pretty complex, still proud of what we designed, the logic and what we built behind it, but we were out ahead of where the customers were. So we were building both for like small team workflows and for really large enterprise customers at the same time. And given what we had for funding and what the team was, we overstretched ourselves. That really was not a fun lesson to learn, but great product, was hard to really implement small team and enterprise at the same time. Luckily, this is about the time where we had Bob starting to join the company, like what we're doing, and he started talking to us about another application for drones, which was incredibly action-oriented. It was using drones to drop good bugs, to attack bad bugs in the field. Really didn't know a whole lot about this. Pretty excited to learn this was between a $3 and a $5 billion market that was growing 14, 15% year over year. Learned that there were some significant advantages to doing it by drone. There was a reason why people were asking UC Davis to find a way to do it. It wasn't just a cool technology platform in hopes of a problem. It was a problem that was seeking out development. And there was huge room to grow. Came up with a quick marketing video. Forgive me for being a little bit salesman-y, but I think hopefully this will explain it a little bit better since it's a new concept to a lot of people. I'll give you an idea of what the challenges are. Hopefully that helped. So we're at the stage where we've been spending about a year and a half now out into the fields learning how to do this operationally. We have the mindset now of let's use as much commercially available products, both hardware and software, as possible to put together an end-to-end solution that people are willing to pay for. So we didn't do any free trials whatsoever. You had to pay for us to come out there and do it. That's probably the most important lesson, and people were willing to pay for it. We had very little pushback on price in general. So we're hitting commercial price points. We were validating it as we built the solution, but now, we transitioned back from being a service provider here in California, finally getting some revenue, getting a little bit of a, relief from the stress of being a startup that's bootstrapping to a large degree, even though we have some funding. At a certain point, the bootstrapping was, pretty severe. And we're getting revenue. Now do we transition back to being a software and hardware developer? Do we want to do that? That's, critical question, but yeah, we're pretty aggressive. We are at heart a technology company, not a service provider solely. So we realize that not everybody has our level of expertise in drones, and that we need to scale this. So how do you do that in environments like this where drones don't come equipped with sensors? And they certainly don't have all the agriculture information that you need to know to do this application well. There's certain environmental conditions that you shouldn't release in. There's pesticide treatment if somebody is spraying recently, you shouldn't be dropping live insects because they'll kill the good guys that are, fairly expensive, temperature, all that. So this is where our software is focusing now. Like, how do we scale what we know is a proven service using both our drone knowledge and focusing on drone technology, but also that same workflow that we needed before that bridges independent drone operators to a supply chain, to a customer that needs demand, and then building in a whole flight program around it and scaling that. So that's really our current state right now, is we're mid-development for scaling agriculture. Takes both drone expertise, like I said, but realistically, we're back to a lot of the software development. Like, how do you scale that? How do you keep that same permission settings? How do you build for dynamic teams? How do you do this cost effectively without going too far in the red financially, so we can still be a revenue generating, hopefully profitable company while we're scaling, which is a tough challenge.
Yeah, I know we talked about that even a while back too, about what that difference looks like when you're pure software company, right? Most Silicon Valley, you want pure software, you can scale, right? Yep. Versus it's a service provider, right? Where you're actually doing that part. I was going to remind everyone, if they have some questions, totally use the chat to ask Michael or Andreas questions. I have some pre-questions for you too. Andreas, you ready for that now?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
That was good. I actually love one about your slides. I actually like the demo video you shot, so we'll put that under the YouTube one. It was really helpful for me to see it, because I think you told me about biocontrol, but it was hard for me to kind of relate to what that could look like, right? Yep. With the hopper and all that. So thanks for showing the video. One is actually relating all the way back to, I guess, these kind of first customers, Andreas, right? When you actually were saying too, because we have a couple, if you think about even like Sunny, she's part of cohort now. She's working with the construction industry. They're kind of old school, right? It's like, how do you introduce things to old school industries in some sense, right? New technology. I'm thinking about you were working with farmers. How did you get that part where, even to get to the part like, hey, this is this new technology about it? Or can you walk me through that one, when you're going into this industry that's not necessarily going to be this kind of high tech, but going into it?
Yeah, it's tough. We found that there is no shortcut, and the general advice is you need to find an evangelist within that target company.
Nice.
So the more you're promoting yourself, showing the technology, showing results, most importantly, after you get that first customer, do whatever you can to get that first customer to be willing to share an affidavit with you.
Nice.
Then it becomes a little more viral. But we found on the positive side that a lot of companies had evangelists. There's usually one or two people that really want to adopt technology, and if their culture doesn't, they want to, and they'll help you navigate. They'll hopefully be in a position that they can make some decisions, like invite you onto the field and do an unpaid trial, which once again, and for us, like I heavily recommend against doing anything unpaid, but getting at least a minimal budget, getting you involved and telling you who do you need to convince to adopt it. And then it's up to you to try and get into the room, get the right presentation, try and find out everything you can about what pain points would be, critical to convince that person, and try and get as much intel as you possibly can. Like, you don't try and make this a fair fight when you go in there. Like, try and rig it. Like, try and find out every question they're going to ask you. Pretend like you're cheating on the final exam if you can.
That's a good. So you're actually doing a lot of research on that customer and understanding like what question is going to ask, right? Being prepared.
Yeah, like the most important question to ask is like, what pain points are you willing to pay for? Not what do you
I
have,
love
but what pain points are you willing to pay for?
I love that. That's that sounds like a quote, Andreas. That's a quote. That's good, and that helps the cohort. So even I think what Brianna, she's going to be the senior care industry. All these different industries where it's kind of like you'll need like evangelists to help educate them, and like, oh wow, this is authentic. So I like that one. Another question on the fact that when you were, I'll leave the technical one for Michael, but you actually said that when you came up with this whole example about the doctor doing analysis, but not being able to support the fix, right? How long did it take you? Did it just take a few trial and errors to say like, no, we have to do a fix, or like, what was that process like? Because there's a lot of people that are like, no, Deloitte, they're like consultants. They won't actually solve it, but they'll give you a real report. There is a industry that does that, but you guys decide like,
So there's multiple points of contact that told us that basically their budgets are towards fixing and not towards analyzing. And if it is analyzing, a generalist report wasn't doing it. They needed a very specific problem. So if you could at least tell them like, your nitrogen is low, you need to add nitrogen. That's sellable. If you come with a comprehensive map that says, here are your problem areas, we have some pretty good hypothesis, but you're going to need to use our tool to direct your workers to go and do an inspection. That is a big step forward, but it's really the enthusiastic adopters that are going for that. That's not really something that's easy mass market that's going to sell itself on a video. Like now you're telling people they have to change their daily actions to really get results versus, hey, I'll fly over, you don't have to leave the field, and we'll tell you what you need to do. Even if you're not the one treating it, that would be sellable. But we weren't, and nobody at that point is really capable, and still in agriculture, nobody's capable of just remotely monitoring a field and giving any real sound advice about what you need to do. There is a lot of local expertise that even like AI and all the data modeling in the world won't overcome. You just have too many variables, so you can't take the human out of that.
That's great. I like that. Me and Steven always say, we can use AI to do certain things, but it needs some humanity there too, right? So on that point, we'll still go with the fact that kind of first customer, I like how you said it, Michael's family was very helpful, or at least, right, the piloting. Not everyone has that kind of relationship or have that kind of like first customer that's very friendly. Is there any suggestions of how you got your second customer? Probably wasn't Michael's family, but like just how did you at least get that first customer other than Michael's family?
Yeah, I mean, we use networks. So some of them were virtual, some of them were in person. I was fortunate enough to go through UCLA Anderson's business school, but really you're opening up to all of UCLA's alumni. You don't limit it to the business school. And there's some winery owners in Napa that own some really prestigious properties, and somebody in the alumni association actually like pointed them out to me. So like, you got to talk to them. They're billionaires that run wineries as passion projects. They'll at least let you in and talk to you. Really gracious, is great marketing. Be able to say we're working with them. Once again, that was in the lessons learned of don't do anything for free. We were just grateful that we got into a really prestigious winery and it sounded terrific and it was great, but they didn't have a commitment to using it. So we had an evangelist, somebody who loved it, but there was no financial commitment to it. So when it came to the really busy times of the year when our tool will be most critical, people reverted back to the old way of doing things. That's a little lesson learned on that part. And you've been saying maybe in some ways not necessarily doing these kind of non-paid kind of trial or pilots, maybe doing these paid, because then people might be even more engaged to using it, and you might even get more engagement. That's what you think? Absolutely. It doesn't have to be even at like your marketing points, which is great if you can sell it and validate your product market fit, but just to get somebody's skin in the game, that you get reliable user feedback, it's imperative that I think they have some sort of a commitment that they're trying to get some return on.
Going to on the technology part too, like you, and this is probably one thing that a lot of people can learn too. Yes, you guys had some somewhat technical knowledge, right? Michael said, but in some ways you guys were actually very somewhat conscientious on what technology to use or build and what technology can we use off the shelf to get started. Can you explain that process? Or even what your guys' mindset was, like what should we use right now?
Yeah, it starts off with doing kind of an assessment of what you need to get a marketable product delivered, and kind of mapping out that entire flow and say what is available. is do a real strong assessment of, how do I break all these down? For us, like we broke it down into like data acquisition, which was, drones and people. And then there's, an upload process. How do you get large amounts of data into the cloud? How do you store it and categorize it? Does Google folders work for you, or is it much more specialized? How do you deliver it to people in the field? Is there a platform that farmers already use and would hate to give up, and you need to make your image, your imagery and your data conform to that, or is there absolutely nothing and you have to build it? So go with what's available, and especially my ethos is like get something out there and get testing it, even if you don't own it. Might not be a venture capitalist first answer, but for somebody need to go out there and validate things. It's perfectly fine validating it with commercial software and finding out, or hardware, and finding out what works and what doesn't work, and then finding out where the gaps are. Then you can assess what's really expensive. If there's some component that is essential and it's super expensive to use and it really crushes your margins, and also there's not really a replacement if they wanted to, change their pricing or just discontinue it altogether, where's the critical dependency? And then you remove, critical dependencies and decide to build something in-house that way.
That's great. I like how you said that too. On that point, we were saying when you guys did decide that like this aspect of the product needs to be built by our team, what was some of the challenges there? I know you got Michael on too, but what was those initial challenges just building a product?
One, do we have people on the team with the skills required to build it?
Yeah.
2, time commitment. 3, scoping it out, because as soon as you get excited about it, you can build something that's, like the Taj Mahal, or you can build something like the shack you really need.
I like that one. Another quote.
Yeah. So, building, scaling, costing, those are challenges, I think, for even super experienced, developers. And then, scope creep is another one you really need to look out for.
I put that down as scope. Definitely. When I looked at what you guys were doing initially, I was like, okay, when you were thinking about like what were you going to focus on, right? And now you're focusing on this biocontrols. Would you say now that biocontrol will be like your niche now, and you're just going to be focusing just on that, and that's helping with the scope?
Yeah, and even within that realm, there's subsets that could really increase the scope.
Okay. Even that biocontrol. Could you give me just example what sub things of that biocontrol?
Sure. Like, do you want to work in really hilly terrain and go after these really difficult, vineyards and orchards where you may need some subsystems on the drone to really do very detailed terrain mapping and obstacle avoidance? Or do you want to stick to, flatter, smoother, less obstacle-rich environments?
Nice. Okay, I guess that's great. And I had to read up more about biocontrol after you told me about it, and with the hopper and stuff like that. So I was like, oh wow, this is definitely a lot more.
You get super detailed into that. It's like, not every type of insect or bug flows well through, the same type of hopper. You start looking at some of these things that are actually like flying around when you're trying to release them, like it's a different system. Like, do you and your partners want to deal with that? And for us, we have a supply chain that needs to come along with us. So you look at like new markets, we need a breeder of these insects and bugs. We're not taking that on. So do they also see this market opportunity? For us, like the hilly, areas, that might be a really good opportunity for us. But if the supply chain doesn't think of it as a really great opportunity, or maybe just too capital intensive to raise the specific type of bug that would be needed to commercialize there or change their production line, really got to try and coordinate as much as you can in your expansion plan.
Could you just repeat biocontrol in layman's terms, or why that started and why that's trending? Is that a good way?
Yeah, so it's ancient. Think about the lady beetle that protects your backyard when you're growing flowers. That's the original concept. The idea is a sustainable agriculture, less chemical dependency, be used by organic or non-organic. But the idea is that you use the natural predator of the pests that are eating your crops and damaging your bottom line to help control the population. So it's been around forever. It's been commercial for decades now. What's revolutionary is the application methods of doing it.
I like that. I know I have a few more really detailed technical questions, but I was going to ask Stephen, do you have a question for Andreas or Michael?
Yeah, I got a question for you. So to give you some background, Andreas, so I grew up in a pretty small farm town, really kind of all around the ag industry up in Oregon, and through kind of the years of doing that, learned that there's a lot more to crop science and ag that kind of meets the eye, right?
Yep.
And it's not a really tech heavy industry, as you kind of explained in your presentation and in some of the questions Curling asked. So one of the things that we've seen in some of the startups we've come across is that sometimes it's one thing to kind of see a tech solution in an industry and a whole nother to actually apply it and actually get it to work and get it to be kind of a viable solution for people, right?
Right.
Was there a learning curve for you in jumping into the ag industry, especially going from you talked about kind of imaging and stuff like that to actually doing more of the biocontrol and kind of being that integral part really within that life cycle of the crop?
Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve, and we're still on it. I think everybody in this industry is. And one of the first things we learned was that agriculture is not a homogeneous industry. I mean, you have large commodity crops and specialty crops. Those I now think of as two different industries. So I don't even think of us as being like an agricultural technology company. We're an agricultural technology company focusing on specialty and permanent crops and not commodity crops. So the more you're out there hearing feedback, the larger you realize the learning curve really is. Barriers to adoption we've learned are cultural in a lot of cases, and it's the culture of where you're working is also the individual business culture and who's incentivized by what. We've learned that certain sales just won't go forward if you tell somebody it will save you 15-20%, but you're going to have to work an extra hour a day. Some people don't get incentivized by that, but they may be a decision maker. So then you say, okay, well, all right, now we need to figure out, like, can we also do a time saving? And do we need to focus on efficiency more than, bottom line growth, or can you do both? And yeah, there's a lot of learning curves. And how do you figure out if that's an anecdotal response or if that's really, a market indicator?
Yeah.
And, kind of a follow-up to that, did you have any sort of, mentors you were able to kind of leverage or found out that kind of helped you along the way? Did you have team members that had kind of prior knowledge to kind of help you through some of those things, or was a lot of it just like trial and error?
All of the above, really. So let's do Michael's family, particularly his Aunt Kelly. Like, she's been working in this industry for decades and in multiple roles, from winemaker to consultant, focusing on high-end wines. Like her husband is focusing on more of the mass market wines. We learned that those are two very different business models, and both of them were incredible mentors about the unit economics of the applications, the science, the adaptability, the culture. So absolutely, from very early on, we relied really heavily on mentors. And on the tech side, of course, there's a lot of mentors we needed to lean on to help develop new technologies or find developers around the world. So yeah, in all aspects, we're pretty grateful for the mentors, and we're looking forward to meeting new ones.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
One aspect of, could you give like a little small synopsis of like the tech stack you are using, Andreas?
That's probably a Michael question. So the opportunities that we were given for different credits, we've developed on different cloud services. We've probably we've used basically the big three. So
Okay.
For a while we developed on Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud, because different accelerators gave us different access to different cloud credits. We built both for iOS and Android. So we were on tablets, iPhones, all Android devices for a while. And right now we've kind of deprecated a lot of the remote sensing work because we really want to focus solely on the development of this beneficial application, the biological treatment applications. And a lot of that is still being designed, to be honest. So
yeah,
what we're currently using is maybe not what our end product is going to be built and designed upon.
that makes sense. But at least I gave just an overview. And going on to that end product, if you had this kind of dream of what the end product of UAV IQ would look like, right? Would it still have this kind of mixture of this humanity, this kind of service provider, right? And this kind of technology? Is that what you think it's going to look like in about 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some comparables in other industries. You talked about construction industry being, slow to adopt and old school, but that's actually the fastest growing sector, I believe, for drones right now. And you start being able to prove your worth. There's some high end growth opportunities there. So we plan on being able to bridge independent drone operators. So we're not going to go and hire employees all around the world to work in what really is a seasonal business as U.S. W-2 employees. But we plan on bridging the service providers. There's a lot of qualified drone pilots out there who don't necessarily know the mission that well, especially flying in terrain-rich environments. So we know that we can build technology that can help a basically proficient drone pilot do these types of flights safely and really scale that. So there's a need for technology to help grow the service that I think we're pretty instrumental in, and that's a focus. And then also integrating the supply chain. We've been working with supply chain partner now. We kind of understand it a bit. We understand their needs, and being able to bridge the drone specific operation with the supply chain. I think that's a pretty robust model, and that's kind of worked well in other industries as well.
That's good. I'm trying to see what's UAV IQ be in 5 to 10 years. Would one part of that vision be, if it's kind of like this gig economy, Andreas, right? That you definitely have the platform for it, right? That it becomes this kind of Uber for AgTech, right? There's another person coming out, right? You guys will create the platform for it. You guys will create all the other things that are needed, but you can have this kind of gig economy where other people can kind of use your platform to help. Would it look kind of like that?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, there's a couple million drone pilots.
Yeah.
Very, very, maybe a couple hundred to a couple thousand that are full-time professional drone pilots. So you see a lot of excess talent out there that would either love, some side money or to grow their primary business. However you look at it, as long as you're basically qualified, have platforms that are capable of doing the operation, we would love to give additional work to a lot of these pilots. And then, once again, that's comparable to how drone pilots work in some of the other industries as well.
Is it okay? So it's very similar part, because when you were talking about what that scale looks like for you, I always tell CEOs, okay, what would this look like if it was easy? Tell me what it would look like, right? Okay, I'm creating this platform, make sure the supply chain's fine, and then make sure people can get on securely, and then boom, right?
Yeah,
you have a workforce,
a training and logistics platform, and what can you do to make sure that a drone pilot's drone is doing exactly what they need. So if you can solve getting the drone to do what it needs to do, and the pilot's there as a safety monitor more than anything, then you're in the right position.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I can see the scaling now. It's just kind of helping out this talk on my part. Stephen, any final questions offhand?
No, I'm good. This was an exciting talk. I definitely learned a lot, and it's really cool to hear your story, Andreas, and hear everything about what you do and how it's kind of gone to this point. So it's really cool.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah. I always say, like, thank you for your service in general, right? You have a really unique kind of journey that you've been on, but that I think that's always was an important part of your journey, learning all that. And I feel like being part of service too, it kind of makes you agile, right? It's your superpower.
Yeah.
Right.
Learn to accept it, can't change, sort of a deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
To throw it out there, if there are any vets out there who are interested in learning to become pilots, we do some training. We're kind of limited that, but we partner with some other 501Cs that do a great job of training vets for free to become commercial drone pilots. So if anybody's inspired and wants to learn how to do that as a either primary job or just to get better at it, maybe pick up some gig work, then please reach out and contact us.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I know you had your contact information. We'll put it on the bottom of YouTube too. But that's great, Andreas. You're doing that. Michael, thanks for coming on too, supporting. That's all good.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I'll see if Sunny's on. Sunny, you on? You ready to do your?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So Sunny's part of our current cohort, Andreas. She's the one that's in that construction industry. So it's really unique for her to hear your take on that and how you kind of navigate industries like that or trying to adapt new technologies. But I told Sunny, like, this is your little 30 seconds of fame. Sunny, you can talk about Black Logics. You got it.
Okay, yeah. So basically, landscape architects generally have issues such as lack of outsourcing, data technology, as you were talking about, use of budgets are too small and timeframes are too short. So basically, Black Logics provides the real-time on-site project design, which is easy to use. There's no CAD experience, directories to specific product manufacturers, and it saves time and makes budgeting easy.
That was great, Sunny. I think that's like that. That's like the newest version of it. So that's great. I know next week we'll have you like show your updated slides too, so everyone can see that. But yeah, Sunny's part of the current cohort with Brianna and Chris, all at the Cal State San Marcos Innovation Hub. So I'll give them a shout out. But thanks, Sunny. I guess that concludes tech school. I think everybody knows offhand we started doing this just to help out some of the startups that we can touch. So Andreas was great. I definitely gave us feedback in general how maybe startups can navigate. But I think we're in good shape. Anything else, Stephen?
Not really. Other than we had some technical difficulties trying to get YouTube Live to work. So I'll bring up that recording later today, on the channel for those that weren't able to, tune in on YouTube Live or, who want to watch it later. So we'll do that. But yeah, that's about it.
All right. We'll take care, everyone. And thanks, Andreas, Michael, cohort.
Bye,
thank you guys for all
everybody.
coming. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.